All right, today we're cracking open one of the biggest, strangest astronomical cold cases of the 20th century. It's a story about a mysterious, unbelievable explosion, a desolate wilderness, and a puzzle that took scientists decades to even begin to solve.
So picture this. It's a quiet summer morning in 1908, deep in the Siberian forest. And then, without warning, the sky just detonates. An explosion with the force of hundreds of atomic bombs completely flattens the landscape. But here's the weird part. When investigators finally got there almost 20 years later, this is what they found. A forest of ghosts. All the trees blown outwards from a central point.
The scale of this is it's hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about 80 million trees, just gone, wiped out over 830 square miles. To put that in perspective, that's an area bigger than the entire city of London, just leveled in an instant.
But here's the kicker. The one clue that turned this whole thing from a natural disaster into a full-blown cosmic whodunit. For all that incredible destruction, there was no crater, not a dent, nothing. So the big question was, how in the world do you get the largest impact event in modern history with no impact? To really get what happened here, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to that day and hear from the very few people who actually witnessed the event. First off, you got to understand just how remote this place was. We're talking about the middle of Siberia. Then and now, it's one of the least populated places on the entire planet. And that isolation, that's a huge part of why this mystery just sat there, unsolved for so long.
The only people around for miles were the local Evenki people, and their stories, which were collected years later, are absolutely chilling. They talked about a pillar of fire in the sky, a second sun that was too bright to look at, followed by a sound that felt like the sky was falling down. People were literally blown off their feet. Okay, let's put some hard numbers on this thing. We're talking about an explosion of up to 20 megatons. What does that even mean? Well, think about the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Now, multiply that energy by 250. The shockwave was so immense it was felt hundreds of miles away, and it was even picked up by instruments all the way over in Europe.
So you're probably thinking, an explosion that big? Why didn't scientists rush right over? Well, as it turns out, world history had other plans, and it's the reason this investigation went cold for almost 20 years. The timing was, frankly, terrible. The event happens in 1908, but right after that, the world basically descends into chaos. You've got World War I, then the Russian Revolution, then a massive civil war. A scientific trip to the middle of nowhere was the last thing on anyone's mind. So the scene of the crime sat there, untouched by science, for nearly 2 decades. Every cold case needs a dedicated detective, right? For Tunguska, that was Leonid Kulik. He was a Russian mineralogist who became totally obsessed with the stories. He was convinced a giant iron meteorite had hit the Earth, and he was going to be the one to find it. Finally, in 1927, he led the first team to reach the site. And what he found was surreal. Right at ground zero, the trees weren't knocked over. They were just standing there, like a forest of telephone poles, completely stripped of every branch and all their bark. It told him one thing for sure. Whatever happened, the blast must have come from directly above. So, Kulik's big expedition only made the puzzle harder. He confirmed the massive butterfly-shaped pattern of damage. He saw the sheer scale of it all, but still no crater. And even after several more trips, he never found a single piece of a meteorite. The main piece of evidence was completely missing. Okay, let's fast forward a few decades. Science gets better, we've got computers, and a really solid theory finally starts to come together. And it turns out the solution to this mystery wasn't on the ground at all. It was miles up in the air. The key concept here is something called an airburst. It's pretty much what it sounds like. An incoming asteroid or comet hits our atmosphere at an incredible speed, and the pressure and heat are just too much for it. So instead of hitting the ground, it violently explodes in the air, releasing all of its energy at once. And suddenly, everything clicks. An airburst explains everything. Those computer models, they show that an explosion from above would create that exact butterfly pattern of destruction. And it explains the telegraph pole trees too. The blast came straight down on them. No crater needed.
If you want a modern comparison, just think about that meteor over Chelyabinsk, Russia, back in 2013. We all saw the dashcam videos. That rock was maybe the size of a 5-story building. It exploded really high up and still shattered a million windows. Well, the Tunguska object was more like a 25-story skyscraper, and it exploded much, much lower. The difference in destructive power is just staggering.
But, this is science. And like any good detective story, the case isn't completely slammed shut. The airburst is definitely the leading theory, but scientists are always asking what if. And there are some other really interesting ideas still on the table. One really cool idea is the skimmer theory. What if a huge, tough iron asteroid didn't explode at all? What if it just screamed through our atmosphere, created that devastating shockwave, and then just shot right back out into space? A cosmic hit and run. That would perfectly explain why there's no crater and no leftover fragments, right?
Then there's the Lake Checo theory. About 5 miles from ground zero, there's this lake that's kind of strange. It's really deep and shaped like a cone. And get this, when scientists studied the tree rings around it, they found evidence that the lake was likely formed right around, you guessed it, 1908. So could a small piece have broken off and created this lake, hiding the impact site in plain sight for a century?
So let's recap our main suspects. You have the classic airburst. That's the front runner. The evidence really fits. Then there's the skimming asteroid, which neatly explains the lack of evidence. And finally, the Lake Checo theory, which suggests a small piece of the puzzle was right there all along. Of course, a mystery this epic is going to attract some, let's say, creative explanations. People have blamed this on everything from crashed UFOs and mini black holes to a secret weapons test by Nikola Tesla. Now, there's no scientific evidence for these, but it just goes to show you how deeply this event has captured our imagination. At the end of the day, all the best evidence really does point back to an asteroid airburst. But the fact that smart people are still debating the details, still researching new angles over a century later, that's what's so great about science. It's not about being right. It's about the constant search for answers. And all of this leaves us with one final and pretty critical question. Tunguska wasn't some ancient history from the age of dinosaurs. This happened. It was a wake-up call from the cosmos. We know for a fact that it will happen again. The only question is, next time, will